Hey guys, it's a special Thursday interview video, and because I got a press release, it was like, oh, you guys know me. When things come to me, I must do them. So I'm here with Drew Crecente, who runs Jennifer Ann's group, and Drew has a very specific story that we will tell. I want you guys to get it from him. Drew, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to talk with you and your viewers.
Yeah. Now I'm sure your personal story hits people between the eyes. So I wanted to give you a chance to tell it the way you want to tell it, because I know if I come at it, I'm a bit of an unstoppable force, Drew. So if I say it, it's going to punch people in the face and knock them out. So how did you come to your current line of work?
So my organization, Jennifer Ann's group, our goal is the prevention of teen dating violence. And this is not a vocation that I had for years and years. In fact, I had worked in technology, doing consulting, working for banks 10 years ago, actually. And my only child was a senior in high school, and she was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. I had no idea the prevalence of the issue of dating abuse and dating violence amongst kids.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking high school, middle school kids. And, if I had had any knowledge, it may not have changed anything, but it really doesn't matter because the situation is what it is. I was a parent. My only child was killed. This is the way that I can feel like I continue to be a parent to Jennifer. So I created a group to educate people and increase awareness about this issue, about the prevalence of this issue, first of all, and then to try and educate people and change some attitudes about what is and what isn't acceptable behavior.
Yeah. Now, I think a lot of people in your situation might try to shut off the world and just see danger around every corner. But the thing I like about your approach is that you're engaging various technologies, I guess, because of your tech background. And you've correctly identified that video games get unfairly blamed for violent behavior. Now, you believe that games can actually be a tool to prevent violence. And I share this opinion. So I want to get your perspective on how you think that this can be used as, I don't want to say a tool because that sounds, cold, but as a delivery mechanism for your message.
So, I initially had more of a traditional approach of creating, printing, and distributing physical resources. And I still run the nonprofit organization alone. It's just me. And it became more and more impractical to continue to ship things and expensive. So in 2008, I started thinking, what kind of digital item can I have instead? Because I know that sending a digital item is a lot easier, generally speaking, than shipping things. I mean, my second highest expense used to be to UPS for mailing. We'd mailed over 500,000 of our different resources throughout the US and the UK by then. So in 2008, I said, you know what? A video game really makes a lot of sense because, well, for one, I know that that's the kind of thing that would appeal to this demographic. And at the time, there was probably not as much awareness that it appeals really to most all demographics. Remember, this was 2008. The other thing is that I really thought that it would maybe attract some media coverage, frankly, because people kept blaming and faulting video games for violence and for bad things happening. And I thought, well, maybe by kind of turning it over like this and using it as a tool to prevent violence, maybe I'll get some coverage. And so some of it was just kind of being pragmatic in terms of looking for some exposure. And it worked. It worked. I myself was not able to create a game. If I had been able to create a game, I didn't know what that game would look like because I really didn't know what I wanted this game to be. So I decided, there's a lot of people in the world that have a lot of really good ideas. So let me start a contest. And that's what we did. The first year was 2008, like I said, and we had a video game design competition for people to create a video game about teen dating violence without using any violence in the game itself. And that, again, was a practical aspect because I didn't want people creating vigilante-style games. I just saw that as very, very quickly devolving into chaos. It was easier to just remove that from the table. But then the other nice thing about that is that limitation really forces people to look for and apply a creative approach, which is absolutely what has happened. So over the years, we've run this contest every year. And one of the things that's really exciting to me is that the winning games have come from around the world. Well, we've had winning games from Thailand, India, Argentina, Ireland, Belgium. In fact, just yesterday, I heard from who's now become a friend. He's won our contest, I think, 3 times, and he lives right outside of Brussels. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, he's okay, but it was good to know that he's okay despite all of that's been going on and all that happened yesterday. So, part of what's exciting to me about having these people from other countries enter, I mean, part of it is, of course, just knowing that we have a reach, an international reach. But also these developers, in designing and developing these games, they have to research the issue. Every year without fail, I get emails from people from around the world that say, I had no idea this was such a problem at such a young age, but this knowledge that I have will now inform me. And my hope is that it will inform them regardless of what they do, even if they don't go on to become full-time video game developers, because this is important information. And I'm really encouraged that people, for example, in India, know more about this now, because we can't always rely on the governments and the schools to get their act together and share this information with us. So we want cultural change. I love the idea of getting directly to the people who want to change things, as opposed to waiting for the bureaucracies to get there.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people want to stick their hands in the sand on this issue because, I mean, it's things like 14-year-olds in these situations. It immediately makes some people want to sort of run away and hide, especially in this sort of Puritan phase we seem to be getting into for reasons I don't understand. But what are sort of the basics that people need to know that you'd be looking for someone to include in a game about teen relationship violence?
Well, there's a few things. First of all, there are aspects of abuse that would be readily apparent to anybody. If somebody hits you, okay, that's physical. If somebody molests, rapes you, okay, that's sexual abuse. We know these things. But there's also emotional, verbal, psychological abuse that is much, much harder to define. And younger people don't have a lifetime of relationships with which to compare that behavior. So to them, this might be what a relationship is always going to be. Mm-hmm. If they saw a healthy relationship modeling in their parents, that's one thing. We know that not a lot of people necessarily see that in their parents. Mm-hmm. So that leaves them turning to their peers who know as little as they do, or to the media. And it's not hard to find something, even something as innocent as Say Anything, when he's outside her room and he's holding the boombox over his head, this really romantic thing. I mean, he's being pretty stalky there, I mean, that's really what's happening. Now, we understand Hollywood's approach is different, but if you're maybe 11 years old and you see that, you might not be thinking, oh, this is kind of a Hollywood version. You might be thinking, oh, this is acceptable. This is okay. This is the way we should be. So what we want to do is we want to provide something that's interactive, okay, and can address the nuance associated with this issue. And this is why video games are really awesome. If you give somebody something static, just content, a book, it's very difficult to address all of the different aspects of something, to keep slicing it down to get to the nuanced kind of heart of it. And what you would have to provide would be a book this big. So you wind up either overwhelming somebody with too much content that doesn't apply to them, or you give them this very high level black and white, which doesn't work. It just doesn't. Life isn't black and white. You know, the news is, politics are, that's the way it's presented to us, but that's part of the problem. Life is gray, right? So that's one of the great things about video games. They're interactive. They deal with nuanced, complex issues in a really fantastic way. One of the things that's important that I point out all the time is girls aren't the only ones that are abused. Men are abused too. Boys are abused too. It's not just heterosexual relationships. It's also same-sex relationships. It's not just wealthy people or poor people or short people or tall people or green people or purple people. It's all people. And that's one of the great things that you can do in a video game. So although we don't require it, one of the things I like to see is I like to see an appreciation of the impact that abuse can have on all kinds of people. Part of the value of that is so that you don't have people saying, well, guys get abused too, which is what I've heard so often.
Yes.
While I'm doing my thing, it's like, I didn't say otherwise. And we have some of our games show that. Some of them don't. And when they don't, people say, well, guys are abused too. I'm like, hey, look at all of our games, because some of our games show that, they do. I recognize that. I think it's important to recognize that. But again, that's the value of the nuance aspect. Because if you only have 15 seconds to cover it, you don't get to go into all of that, okay? So, the games, they have to be, entertaining and enjoyable enough to be played, okay? But at the same time, you need to have enough educational information to help people identify unhealthy behavior. And hopefully you also have something in there that hopefully will resonate with people. One of the things I've found is that the narrative type games seem to be better at really engaging with somebody. Because that gives you the opportunity to tap into things like empathy, which is really important in terms of understanding the impact. Because part of what we're doing is we're wanting to educate young people so that they can see, hey, this is not healthy behavior. Or that they can see, oh, I shouldn't engage in this unhealthy behavior myself. Or, hey, my friend or what I witnessed in the hallway yesterday was unhealthy behavior. So that they feel strong enough in their knowledge that they can say something about it or do something about it. Because bystander intervention is important. What we're talking about, not as much in the United States, because we've kind of been on this trajectory for a long time. But in some countries, we still have countries on this planet that don't believe that such a thing as rape exists in a married relationship. I mean, that's a problem, okay? Trying to explain something as nuanced as it's not acceptable to tell your dating partner how to dress when you guys are going out, that's really hard to dive down that deep when you still don't think that rape is a thing amongst married people. So that's one of the great things, again, about the games, is that they're interactive. And they allow a young person to experience certain behaviors in a very safe way that they wouldn't otherwise be able to, safely. Not only that, it allows for this self-paced exploration. So rather than sitting in a classroom with all of your peers and they start talking about, sexual abuse kind of issues, and you might have a question, but you might not want to raise your hand and say, well, how about oral sex? Really? I mean, okay, maybe it's different. When I was in high school, I wouldn't have asked that in front of all my peers, at least not in a classroom setting. But if somebody's curious about it and it's in the game, they can explore it on their own. And they don't have to feel like they're being judged by anybody, because it's a game. It's not judging them. It's just there to inform them, give them some different points of view, and hopefully help prevent the kind of tragedy that happened to my family.
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue in gaming as well that I mean, I know in the discussions I've had, you can get it's there are different difficulties in getting young women to open up than there are with young men. Young women are afraid that they'll be seen as too bossy or too slutty. Whereas young men are afraid that the minute they ask a question, they're going to get jumped on as being some sort of sexual aggressor. And so they don't want to talk. This idea that the man is always the aggressor and the woman is always the victim is a big problem in the dialogues in the world. And I find getting young men to engage is a unique challenge because they are so afraid of being treated as a rapist in waiting. Have you because I know you've mentioned that it's difficult to get young people to open up. Is this in line with your experiences as well, or have you sort of found some sort of different issues?
For the most part, I'm somewhat removed from the people who actually play the games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we get reviews and I read about, what people have to say. But for the most part, I don't have conversations with people who play the games.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it's a function of time,
Right.
um, because my goal is kind of at a higher level to provide something that a school district, for example, will use in their health course, or that parents will use to inform themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There was a column in Wired called Geek Dad, and he wrote something like, until I played this game, talking about one of our games, I never realized that I had been in an abusive relationship. But this is kind of, opened my eyes, and this is a conversation I'm having this weekend with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of it also is now that we've told you, hey, in addition to drugs and sex and rock and roll or whatever that you talk to your kid about, healthy relationships is part of what you really should be talking to them about. If you're not comfortable doing it, you play a game, you tell your kid, I want you to play this game. They play the game. After they've played the game, you now have this common ground that you can discuss, and you don't have to personalize it because
Right.
you can talk about the game, about the characters in the game, and the kid doesn't have to feel like they're being judged or preached to. Again, there's a lot of value in allowing them to kind of holistically recognize this and kind of come to this awareness somewhat on their own. And the game is just there to assist. But again, if it's not interactive, it's not going to work the same way. And I'll just add, I'm sorry,
No,
but I'll add, when people talk about games do this or games do that, it's funny because games are just another medium.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it let's call it a tool for the sake of having something easy to call it. It's a tool, and so is a hammer. And you can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to destroy a house. And I don't really understand what is inherently so bad about this tool, about this medium. It's what you do with it. Now, there are aspects of it that potentially make it more powerful, some of what I've already discussed.
Yeah.
So that means that maybe we need to be more careful. Could somebody create a game that could change somebody's mind in a bad way? Yeah, why not? I mean, advertisements change our minds all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but this kind of blanket games cause violence is, I mean, it's strange. I don't understand it, and I'm guessing it's by people who don't know much about the medium.
Yeah, I was laughing as you were speaking because, guys, I swear I did not prime Drew before this interview. Use the exact same analogy of the hammer that I use all the time on this channel. So I started laughing. I'm like, oh my God, people are going to think I fed you talking points. But it's interesting because that whole idea of starting the dialogue, I've been having conversations on Twitter with people about season 2 of Daredevil because my interpretation of it is Daredevil, Matt Murdock, is the victim of an abusive relationship with Elektra as an abusive partner. And quite a few guys, when I put this on Twitter, have said, I didn't see it that way, but You're right. And the thing that makes it complicated and people start going, no, she was being controlled and all this stuff, abusers always have a reason. There's always some excuse, there's always some rationale for what they do. And the victims or the the targets have an element of perceived free will. It seems like they are isolating from their friends by their choice. It seems that they become, especially men, become aggressive and standoffish because they are choosing to. But what in fact has happened is that that personal boundary has been violated, and they're not making choices on a rational paradigm. And I think that is something, and tell me if I'm right or tell me if I'm wrong, but that is what makes the psychological aspects of abuse so difficult to spot, is this idea of choice and how it undermines a person's choices on both sides. I mean, let's face it, the people who are the aggressor may not even know what they're doing is wrong because that's what was done to them. And they were convinced that it was okay, that this is, normal. And so we have this multi-generational cycle of abuse that all of a sudden somebody is going, no, you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. And it just backs all up the chain that is like, what do you mean? This is what happened to me. This is what happened to my mother. This is whatever. You get into some really big issues here. But and I'm assuming that paradigm wasn't in your family, and your daughter was still a victim. So where do we start unpacking this very, especially in games, this very sticky wicket of accountability and choice?
Well, you said a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'll start by saying I'm familiar with the characters of Daredevil and Elektra. Have not seen the TV show, so I can't speak to that dynamic. But I will tell you that absolutely part of what happens psychologically to targets, and I love that word. It's funny. I prefer that word. I don't like victim.
Yeah.
And very often people who have been what we would call victims don't like that word either. So targets are great though. Part of what happens with someone who's the target is that issues of self-esteem and how they see themselves changes. Mm-hmm. And it's not changing within 24 hours. It changes over a long period of time. It's part of what's so insidious about verbal, emotional, psychological abuse is that it's so gradual. The analogy that's been used for years is one of putting a frog in lukewarm water and turning up the temperature as opposed to dropping them in boiling water. By the time you realize it's too hot, it's too late to hop out. And then some of the things you mentioned, like isolation from friends and family, for example. Yes, and that is absolutely the type of thing that happens, and it might be that the abuser or aggressor is isolating their target, not because they thought through, oh, this is how I'm going to keep them from having a support network. It might be because that's what how they saw mom and dad used to do it, or brother or sister, whoever it is, that this is learned behavior, or something they see in their favorite TV show or read in a book or heard in songs. So you talk about this cycle, and that's part of the cycle. And, there's another cycle they refer to within a relationship, but this is absolutely part of the cycle because, we know that if your family has had this issue, you are more likely to have this issue, and your kids are more likely to have this issue. We also know that about things like alcoholism. Yep. So some of it may be genetic in terms of alcohol, but some of it may be learned behavior. You see what is normal and what is acceptable as you're growing up. It's really difficult to then in 30 minutes kind of unravel all of that and tell somebody, oh, everything you believed was true isn't. And again, that's part of the value of video games, is because you allow them, instead of reading about it, you allow them to participate in it. Instead of explaining it to them, you allow them to kind of learn it. Yeah. And there's a huge difference here. We are talking about a really significant issue in general. In the United States alone, okay, so people who are young people in abusive relationships, there's a lot of problems. failing school, dropping out of school, alcohol, drug problems, all of those are more significant in people in abusive relationships. And they're 4 to 6 times more likely to become pregnant as well. So we're talking 80% plus of people who become pregnant while they're still in school are in abusive relationships. And it's definitely above 80%, but that's the low end of the stats. We also know that it's around 2/3 of those people will then become adults in abusive relationships. In the United States alone, the impact of intimate partner violence, IPV, $8 billion a year, over $8 billion a year, okay? That's just in the United States. We have countries, like I said, where they haven't even really dealt with this issue yet for adults, let alone for kids. Part of what we're doing is we're trying to provide games that you don't have a computer at home or broadband because the country you live in, people don't have that, but you still have a smartphone.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of how they leapfrogged telephone poles. They did for that. They don't have telephone poles throughout the country, and they use a smartphone instead. And on that smartphone, they can play these games for free, of course, because we're trying to increase awareness about this issue so that they can decide what's going to be acceptable. So they might see mom and dad engage in certain behavior, and they get to decide, I'm not going to be like that. And to do that, though, you do have to get them when they're young. And I'm not trying to indoctrinate anybody. I'm trying to just share with people what is healthy and what is unhealthy, and encouraging them to aspire to the healthy behavior, because we know they can do it, and we know that they'll be happier when they do. And really, if you think about the impact that this can have on the world, it's tremendous, because issues around abusive relationships, I would imagine anybody hearing these words has been affected by this. If not themselves directly, a good friend or relative has been. I mean, if nothing else, the statistics prove that out. By the time, in the United States, by the time an American college student graduates from college, 44% of them will have been in an abusive relationship. And these are college graduates.
Yeah.
These aren't those people, whatever that means, because we like to kind of think of this as a problem for those people. You know, and again, it's this entire culture. Part of the reason people believe that is because of the way that it's presented in the news and in entertainment media. It's presented as an issue for those people. I'll tell you one of the reasons that people have this misconception that, for example, it happens to poor people and not wealthy people. Wealthy people have far more options when abuse is going on. If you don't have the means, you call the police.
Yeah.
If you have the means, instead you might be able to call a therapist or a lawyer. When you call a therapist or a lawyer, it doesn't become a part of the public record. So it doesn't make it into the news.
Well, it also doesn't have to escalate to the level of criminality before anybody will do anything about it.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, but it also contributes. It contributes to all these misconceptions that people have. I did this thing last summer. Last July was terrible in the United States for mass shootings. I took 4 mass shootings, and Harvard has this really cool tool that Berkman Center does, where you can look at news coverage of stories. So I took 4 mass shootings. In a mass shooting, well, all of these were, I think 4+ people were shot. 2 of them happened in public places where you had someone killing someone that they weren't related to. The other 2 were where people were getting killed by someone they knew, and they thought loved them and that they loved. Happened in a house. I looked for the news coverage for 1 week following, and the difference is staggering. It was about double the news coverage for these shootings that occurred in public places. The reason, the assumption is that is more newsworthy. The assumption, again, is that it's more newsworthy because it's something that people need to be more informed about, because it's the kind of information they need in order to live their lives.
Yeah.
The problem with that is, first of all, we know that That's not true. We know that you don't necessarily get any kind of warning sign before something like this happens in your family.
Yeah.
Not to scare people, but it's true. And part of the problem is that there's not a discussion about it, because the media coverage really helps drive public discussion and conversation. That conversation then drives public policy, and the public policy is what drives legislation.
Yeah.
So if it's not being reported about, we're not talking about it, and that means we don't have the protections in place. So again, I want to leapfrog all of these bureaucracies, these schools, these governments, and instead get directly to the people who need this information, especially in countries outside the United States, and allow them to decide for themselves what they're willing to put up with and to be in a happy, healthy relationship.
Yeah. Now, the games are available for free, but you guys are offering up some money for the people that win these contests. You don't expect people to work for free, and it's a decent amount of coin. I mean, first prize is $8,000.
Yes.
Yeah, I want people to know that, because just because the games are available for free, guys, doesn't mean there isn't some money for you. But if people want to get involved, you do have a website, jaga.me, is that correct? JAGGA.me, and some of the games are there. But once people sort of get a sense of what's been done before, how do they enter?
They can enter right from the website. As soon as they go to, it's JAG Game. So JAG is Jennifer Ann's group.
Yeah.
And then Game, JAG Game with a period before the ME. They go there, there's a link to the contest page. It's JAG Game/contest. And they go there, all the rules are there, the FAQs are there, all the prize information in the online registration process. The games are not due until June 1st. So there's still plenty of time. I'll tell you right now, I've gotten registrations from Africa, Asia, South America, and North America. Yes, I don't think I've gotten anything from Europe yet. And I usually have winning games from Europe. So there's still plenty of time for people to enter. There's also links there to further information about teen dating violence so that you can learn more. But one of the things that's really helpful is to play some of the previous winning games. I don't know, maybe 10 or so of them are on that website. And they can either be played in a browser. Some of them you have to download the Unity player. But other than that, you can play them in the browser. And then we have some as well that can be downloaded to Android, iOS, BlackBerry. We even have a Windows Phone app. I made that. It's not a game, but I couldn't make a game.
They are very, they're all over the place in the way people approach them. I mean, yeah, some of them are more like interactive apps that are just sort of A/B choices. Right. Others are much more, like you said, Unity engine experiences that people would consider more of a game. Yeah.
Right. And, that is part of the scoring rubric. We definitely prefer it more to be on the game side than it being just interactive app, because we know that it's more enjoyable. So part of it is, how enjoyable is this game?
Yeah. Now, if people can't, they're not programmers, they're not coders, they're not artists, they can't make a game, but they want to support what you're doing. How do people get involved that way?
They can. Our organization's website is jenniferann.org. If you go to JAG Game, it has links to it. But if you go to jenniferann.org, we've got a wealth of information and other free resources, not just video games. Although I firmly believe that video games are the best approach to this issue, we have other things. We have bookmarks, and you can print them yourself. We have all types of other resources like that you can share. We are also in social media. The we is the royal we, because it's pretty much just me. I tend to focus on Twitter, but we do have a presence in Facebook, Tumblr, Pinterest, LinkedIn, probably other ones that I don't remember right now. But we really could use people just sharing what it is that we do. Part of what we need is we need people retweeting what we're doing, following us, sharing that information. I spoke at GDC last year, for example, and I'm always surprised how many people have never heard of our games. Just because, we're the ones focused on doing this with video games. So I keep thinking that more people are going to know. People that are in the teen dating violence field haven't heard of our games. So what we need is exposure. You know, we get money from sponsors, good people like, I can't think of the name.
Well, it's on your website. So Child's Play, Morgan
Play.
Stanley.
Yes.
You've got Summit, the Ludus Project.
Yeah, the Ludus Project, that was a grant I got last year. That was the first grant I've gotten, so that was really exciting. And we used that, of course, to pay for server costs and hosting and everything, but also so that we can fund these contests. The first year we did it, the first place was $1,000. So we've gone up every year.
Now,
and we're going to continue to do that.
Do you take donations from the general public?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. We are 501c3, so at least if you're in the United States, it is a tax deduction. And we've got a donate button on jenniferann.org. We also have things like, if you are a person who goes and gets the Humble Bundle, and I'm one of those people.
I am addicted to the Humble Bundles.
You can select a charity. Jennifer Ann's group is one of them.
Oh, there you go.
And they actually highlighted us in earlier this year. I think it was January or December maybe. But several months ago, they highlighted us, and that was a huge help. That brought in a lot of money that we normally wouldn't have. Even something as simple as Amazon. If you buy stuff on Amazon, you can select a charity. If you select Jennifer Ann's group, we get like 0.1%. But it adds up. It adds up. There's a lot of opportunities. But especially if you have like some relative or something who's just filthy rich and has terrible karma, and they're trying to figure out what they could do to feel better about themselves, well, point them our way. Because what we're doing is good. It's not just good for us, and it's not just good for teens and parents and educators. I believe that it's also good for the gaming industry. I think it's important to show what you can do with video games and to kind of counter some of the negative press that we get. And I think it's important, and it's valid. We actually, just this morning, I reviewed a paper that I'm working on with a researcher in Rotterdam. We did our own study on checking to see that it changes your attitude about certain unhealthy behaviors. And it does. I mean, we believe that the study shows that. And he sent me the draft of the paper this morning. And so we're planning on having that published, we think, in the Games for Health journal. And so now, not only is this a cool way of approaching it, it's effective. So,
and by changing, you mean changing for the better.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, training pro-social behaviors is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And again, part of it is not like we are, trying to change who people are. We're trying to just share with them what should be acceptable and really what isn't. And everybody wins on that. Because, again, it's not just guys, it's not just girls. It's not just anybody, it's everybody. And people will be happier if they have a better understanding and a better expectation of how they want to be treated and how they should treat somebody else, especially if it's somebody that you care about.
All right, guys, I've been talking to Drew Crecente from Jennifer Ann's group. Drew, thank you for your time. I will put up your Twitter, I will put up your website, and I'm sure you will get a lot of tweets because my Twitter followers are quite active.
That's awesome. I mean, I appreciate it, and I look forward to it, and I look forward to some of your listeners registering for the contest as well, and maybe one of them would actually be the winning game this year, which would be fantastic.
I think this is going to inspire some people just based on private conversations I have had myself. I think that I think it's a great initiative, and I think it's a great way for people to tell their stories that they may not have been able to tell before because, like you said, they'd be judged.
That is very true. Speaking of judging, one of the things that we do have as another kind of benefit is we do have people that are fairly well known in the gaming industry as judges.
Nice.
We also have people who are experts in teen dating violence, But that's one of the things that we try and do is we try and give people the opportunity to get some critique from game journalists or other people in the industry that they respect and admire. So that's part of what the advantage of registering for the contest.
So this is as much like a development lab as it is an awareness contest.
Yes, and that's part of what we're offering this year for first place is we're kind of doing a mini incubator where there's a company, Electric Fund, I believe, in New York City that is going to go a couple of rounds with the winning developer to see what kind of improvements can be made.
Just sort of polish up the mechanics and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never done that. And the other thing is, when I do go speak at conferences, I'll talk about your game. Right?
That doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I promote these games as much as possible to the extent that I'm able to promote them. I'm not much of a promoter, but we're getting the word out, and you can make a difference. So.
Yeah. So see, guys, there is something you can do. Drew, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you again. I really do appreciate it.